MPs vote to overhaul the rules on their own misconduct as the government backs a senior former minister. The suspension of Conservative MP Owen Paterson, ordered by a cross-party watchdog, is now on hold, sparking accusations of sleaze.
When they break the rules, Mr. Speaker, they just remake the rules.
Yeah. I think that she needs to consider the procedures of this House in a spirit of fairness.
As opposition parties say they won't cooperate on drawing up a new system, will be live in Westminster. Also tonight, as the climate talks continue, businesses are told they'll have to start publishing their carbon-cutting plans. The row over Azim Rafiq's treatment at Yorkshire County Cricket Club. As sponsors pull out, his former teammate admits using a racial slur. Caught in a post-Brexit row, the fishing trawler detained in France for a week has been allowed home.
The Promise by Damon Galgut.
And it's third time lucky for the South African writer who's just won the Booker Prize.
And coming up in the sport on the BBC News Channel, Liverpool on the verge of qualifying for the last 16 of the Champions League with 2 games to spare as they faced Atletico Madrid.
Good evening. The House of Commons voted today to rewrite the system of standards and rules for MPs' conduct after the government backed a move to support the Conservative MP and former Minister Owen Paterson. The Cross-Party Standards Committee had said that he should be banned for 30 days for repeatedly breaking lobbying rules, which he denies. The government ordered Conservative MPs to support an amendment calling for that sanction to be reconsidered as part of a new disciplinary process. The vote passed with a majority of 18, with a significant number of Tories refusing to back it. Here's our political correspondent, Ian Watson.
The ayes to the right, 250. The noes to the left, 232.
What divided MPs today were proposed changes to the way they police themselves.
Order. What have you done to this place?
The government narrowly won a vote which could give those accused of breaking parliamentary rules a new right of appeal. Earlier in the Commons, Labour opposed the move and said that politically the matter...
The rules.
Yeah!
And as we can see, it's one rule for everybody else and one rule for the Tory Conservatives. When they break the rules, Mr. Speaker, they just remake the rules.
But Boris Johnson said he just wanted MPs to have the same rights as any other professionals accused of wrongdoing.
May I respectfully say to her that I believe that she needs to vote, instead of playing politics on this issue, which is what they are doing. I think that she needs to consider the procedures of this House in a spirit of fairness.
So what triggered this row? Well, Labour say the changes are being introduced to help this former Cabinet Minister, Owen Paterson. He was facing a 30-day suspension from the Commons after an investigation by the Parliamentary Standards Watchdog found that he'd broken rules on lobbying. But this has now been put on hold while changes to the system are being drawn up. Owen Paterson says the stress of a 2-year investigation contributed to his wife taking her own life, and that a new system will allow his case to be reconsidered.
I just really hope that I'm the last one. No one ever has to go through what I've gone through before, and we can have a much swifter system, a much more just system, and we can move on. And I have a chance to clear my name.
But Labour says the government is showing favouritism towards one of its former ministers. And tonight, privately, some Conservatives are concerned that political ammunition has been handed to their opponents. But wider concerns were expressed at Westminster today too, that if MPs are seen to be rewriting their own rules, then public confidence in Parliament could be further eroded.
If the public believe that we are marking our own homework, our reputation individually and collectively will be tarnished. And independence is essential to protect us.
Reform can only work if it's across the House, and by bringing her amendment today, it looks like we're moving the goalposts.
Some MPs tonight predicted the government will take a political hit for appearing to water down measures on parliamentary standards. But ministers believe the changes are necessary if MPs are to get a fair hearing. Now, Mishal, tonight here at Westminster, the long-standing political cross-party consensus on how to deal with complaints against MPs appears to be shattered because Labour and the SNP say they will not cooperate with the Conservatives on making changes to this parliamentary system of standards. Now, I guess Boris Johnson's political calculation is quite simply this, that away from Westminster, in the wider world, people are far more concerned about what the government's doing to protect their jobs and their prospects rather than what ministers are doing to protect the jobs and prospects of their own MPs.
Ian, thank you. Ian Watson there at Westminster. Now, the Chancellor has told the COP summit in Glasgow that he wants the UK to lead the way in rewiring global finance to tackle climate change. He's given major British companies until 2023 to publish their carbon emissions plans. Environmental groups are sceptical about the impact of the policy, and today hundreds of people joined climate protests in Glasgow. Here's our economics editor, Faisal Islam.
Extinction!
Outside the climate summit on Glasgow streets, some protesters distinctly unimpressed with the role of banks at the COP talks. Inside, the world's finance ministers are promising to change the entire system in response to a ticking environmental clock.
Good morning and welcome to COP26 Finance Day.
The main result, the world's banks, pension funds and insurers promising to invest and lend in a way consistent with net zero by 2050. That's £95 trillion of funds, or 2/5 of the whole of global finance. So bankers and traders in suits are today's equivalent of the famous eco-warriors of 3 decades ago, says the summit's president.
You, my friends, are the new Swampies, so be proud.
Can it really be the case that these guys, the bankers and financiers, can save the world from climate change? That's the hope underlying these incredible numbers, that the lending decisions to businesses large and small will transform entire sectors, from energy to transport, from food to retail. And for politicians, this is a lot more palatable than telling consumers, voters, that their behaviour has to change.
One British bank chief from the institution that funded North Sea oil and gas told the BBC that tough conversations in these sectors where carbon emissions were difficult to limit were already happening.
We're very clear that we are ending funding of harmful activity, and we will only work with people with a credible transition plan aligned with Paris.
The announcements made this morning will discourage finance going to new coal mines or oil fields, for example, but they won't absolutely prevent such flows. Rich nations have also delayed long-promised funds for poorer countries to help with climate change.
The International Energy Agency has come out and said that to get to 1.5, we need to cease all new fossil fuel financing. These commitments today don't add up to that, so we need to see further ambition on moving our investments away from brown into green.
Why are you doing tax breaks for fossil fuel companies?
Green campaigners were crying foul directly to the Chancellor on the site of the negotiations. He acclaimed the UK at the centre of a tidal wave of global green banking, the hope that the carrot of cheap finance, rather than the stick of tough regulations, is the answer for the world. Faisal Islam, BBC News.
Meanwhile, the boss of the energy giant Shell has said that it can hit a target of net zero carbon emissions by 2050, but it will need revenues from its oil and gas business for many years in order to pay for it. Ben van Beurden has been speaking to our business editor Simon Jack at Europe's largest oil refinery in Rotterdam.
20 million tonnes of oil a year flow through Pernis, the largest refinery in Europe. Globally, Shell has a carbon footprint the size of Russia's.
What you see here is predominantly refinery. There's a bit of
Chief Executive Ben van Beurden said Shell's transition to net zero is possible, but it will need the money from its oil and gas business for many years to pay for it.
This facility is going to be transformed. We will produce biofuels, where we will produce hydrogen over the horizon. All these things can only be done if you actually have a facility to work with, but also if you have the cash to invest with it. And that cash at this point in time comes from our legacy business.
But it's not all legacy. Shell wants to develop a new oil field at Cambo in the North Sea. How does he justify that?
So to just say, let's not get oil and gas demands from our own resources, that are probably the most advantaged resources, but let's import it from somewhere else, probably with a larger carbon footprint. I don't think that is going to contribute, of course, not to the balance of payments of the country, but also not to the carbon footprint of the world.
Shell plans to spend 4 times as much on oil and gas as on renewables next year, which is why some doubt it can obey a Dutch court order to halve its net emissions by 2030 and eliminate them by 2050.
Even if you are very generous and assume they get all the amounts of carbon capture and storage and offsets that they need, they might just miss their 2030 targets and they will not be able to deliver on 2050. In fact, they will be increasing emissions till 2030 and still be producing a significant amount of emissions in 2050.
Van Beurden insists Shell's own emissions are on track.
Compared to 2016, which is our reference year, we have reduced emissions already with 17%. And we are on track to get to minus 50% by 2030. That is just going to be measured, it's going to be put in scorecards, and part of my bonus is going to be dependent on us meeting that.
Remember, these targets don't include emissions from customers using Shell products. That's 90% of the total footprint.
This gigantic oil refinery is changing to make less carbon-intensive products. Now, that won't be good or fast enough for some people. We'd probably like to see it shut down tomorrow. But our lives are still very much entwined with industries like this. And in fact, if you have a pension, you own shares in Shell and BP. But there are those who think we should be withdrawing our financial backing for industries like this.
But just selling up and walking away would be a mistake, according to the world's biggest money manager.
We can't have that dialogue with companies if we're not invested in them. By being invested in the companies, we have that seat at the table, we engage with them. We can't divest from the world.
As powerful as Shell is, customers may be more powerful. As long as there's demand for fossil fuels, Shell or someone else will supply it. Simon Jack, BBC News, Rotterdam.
And now to the latest UK coronavirus figures, which show there were 41,299 new infections recorded in the latest 24-hour period. That means an average of 39,691 new cases per day in the last week. As of yesterday, there were 9,517 people in hospital with COVID. 217 deaths were recorded of people who died within 28 days of a positive COVID test. On average, in the past week, there were 163 COVID-related deaths per day. And on vaccinations, more than 8.6 million people have received their booster jab. That number includes the third doses for those with certain health conditions. At the same time, there has been a warning from England's Deputy Chief Medical Officer that there could be hard months to come in the fight against coronavirus. Professor Jonathan Van Tam also said too many people believe that the pandemic is over, even though infection rates remain very high. Well, our medical editor, Fergus Walsh, is here in the studio now. Does Professor Van Tam sound worried to you, Fergus?
Definitely concerned, Mishal, that COVID levels are, as he put it, running hot in the UK, and that's well before flu and other winter viruses kick in. And he warned of a potentially problematic Christmas ahead. Now, we're seeing about 1,000 COVID admissions a day in UK hospitals. That's a quarter of the level we saw in January, but it's still significant. And although deaths are comparatively low, they are creeping up. But there's a lot of unpredictability about the next 4 weeks, let alone the next 4 months. And that's because there are so many variables. How will human behaviour change? Will people be cautious in their social interactions? On masks, Jonathan Van Tam said they're beneficial in some indoor settings. He'd like to see people wearing them in cinemas and when walking around restaurants and pubs. But his central message was on vaccination. He urged people to have their booster dose or indeed their flu vaccine when called. We've just passed the milestone, Mishal, of 50 million people in the UK over the age of 12 having had at least one COVID vaccine, but there are still around 5 million adults completely unvaccinated.
Fergus, thank you very much. The former England international cricketer Gary Ballance says that he regrets using a racial slur against his former Yorkshire teammate Azim Rafiq. In a statement, Ballance admitted that he was responsible for some of the terms Rafiq was subjected to while at the club. Several sponsors have terminated relationships with Yorkshire over its response to findings of racism and bullying. Our sports editor Dan Rowan reports now from Headingley.
It's the most successful club in the history of county cricket, but Yorkshire is now engulfed in a racism scandal centred on former player Azim Rafiq. An independent panel found the spin bowler had been the victim of racial harassment and bullying while at the club. Yorkshire apologised but took no action against any member of staff, and political pressure has been intensifying.
What we've read is deeply shocking and one of the most disturbing events in modern cricket history, in my view. I can think of very few reasons why the board of Yorkshire Cricket Club should remain in place.
After a leak of the investigation's findings, it emerged that a current Yorkshire player repeatedly used a racially offensive term towards Rafiq about his Pakistani heritage, but the panel regarded it as friendly banter, sparking an outcry. Tonight, after mounting speculation, former England star Gary Ballance revealed he was the player concerned. In a statement, the Yorkshire batsman said, "I regret that these exchanges took place, but at no time did I believe or understand that it had caused Rafa distress. If I'd believed that, then I would have stopped immediately. He was my best mate in cricket and I cared deeply for him. I'm aware of how hurtful the racial slur is, and I regret that I used this word in immature exchanges in my younger years, and I'm sure Rafa feels the same about some of the things he said to me as well." Earlier on a dramatic day, a host of Yorkshire's sponsors ended their partnerships with the club as the fallout continued. Emerald Publishing, which has the naming rights to Headingley, Yorkshire Tea, local brewer Tetley's and leisure club operator David Lloyd, all turning their back on the beleaguered county. It's over a year since Rafiq alleged institutional racism.
Playing professional cricket for Yorkshire should be the best time of your life. Unfortunately for me, it wasn't.
Now, with the ECB launching their own investigation, the crisis threatens to undermine the wider game's efforts to tackle discrimination in the sport. It's not just Rafiq's allegations that are doing such unprecedented damage, of course, to Yorkshire. It's also the way that they have been handled and the club's attempts to keep the findings of the report into his case secret and now unravelling rapidly with Ballance's dramatic statement this evening. And as the club prepares to remove the Emerald logo from the wall here at Headingley behind me, they'll know that it can get an awful lot worse as well, because in 2 weeks' time the chairman has been summoned to explain himself in front of a parliamentary committee, and also there, speaking with parliamentary privilege of course, will be Rafiq himself, and he's signalled that he's ready to reveal more details and names about what he went through. This now surely the gravest crisis in Yorkshire's 160-year history.
Dan Rowan at Headingley, thank you. A British fishing trawler detained by France for the last week because of the row over fishing licences has been allowed to leave. The captain has told the BBC his boat was caught in the middle of it all. With relations at their lowest point for years, the Brexit Minister Lord Frost is due to be in Paris for talks tomorrow. From there, our correspondent Lucy Williamson reports.
Detained a week ago for entering French waters without permission, Captain John D. Ward and his crew tonight got permission to leave.
It'll not take us long to get ready to go to sea.
You go straight away the minute.
Half an hour kind of notice, we'll get the engine fired up and we'll get out of here.
Arriving back at his boat from a court hearing in Le Havre today, Captain Ward told the BBC in his first broadcast interview that he didn't understand why the Cornelis Gert-Jan was missing from the EU register.
We had all our documents on the bridges, all in order. We have our licence to fish, everything like this, but I don't know if it was a clerical error or what caused it.
Does he think he's been caught up in a wider political row? My colleague asked him.
The fishing row, definitely. I think we're kind of caught in the middle just, but...
Fishing licences have been a sensitive topic for months. Under the Brexit deal, French boats can still fish in British coastal waters if they can prove they fished there before. The UK says some boats don't meet its criteria. France says it's deliberately blocking applications. By the beginning of this week, Paris was threatening to apply customs checks to every lorry crossing the Channel. The UK was threatening legal action if it did. With Britain and France both threatening concrete action, the Brexit Minister David Frost is due here tomorrow to try to find a way out. Technical problems over paperwork are one thing, but this is about more than that. It's about trust between France and post-Brexit Britain. At a briefing at the Elysee Palace today, I asked the government spokesman what concrete measures France needed to call off the threat of sanctions.
I just told you, we are just waiting for one thing, is for the UK to respect the deal that they signed.
But the deal was vague, wasn't it? Is this just a technical misunderstanding?
No, I really don't think so. I don't think it was that vague.
Tonight, the Cornelis Gert-Jan left Le Havre. Its captain will be back to face charges next year. One small boat navigating the gap between paperwork and politics, as tricky for fishermen as it is for politicians. Lucy Williamson, BBC News, Paris.
More than 30 years after the Lockerbie bombing, Libya is considering extraditing a man wanted by the United States in connection with the attack. 270 people died when a Pan Am plane was brought down just before Christmas 1988. It remains the worst terrorist attack on British soil. In 2003, Libya accepted responsibility, and now the Libyan foreign minister has told the BBC that it is very open to collaborating on the question of extradition. From Tripoli, Orla Guerin reports.
When something like this happens, you have a close member of your family who you love dearly getting murdered. You're handed down a life sentence yourself.
My brother was a typical 20-year-old. He, loved life. He loved sports. He loved politics. He loved his friends. He was the best big brother and the worst big brother at the same time.
On this dark night in 1988, the town of Lockerbie was engulfed in flames and horror. The wreckage of Pan Am 103 crashed to earth. Almost 33 years on, the US is pursuing a new Libyan suspect. Now, from the government in Tripoli, indications of progress.
There is positive outcomes coming. And might there be an extradition? Well, I don't know, but I think we as a government, we are very open in terms of collaboration in this matter. We understand the pain and the sadness of the victims and the families. We need to also respect the laws.
But it's progressing, you think?
Yes, it is.
The new suspect is Abu Ajayla Mohammed Massoud, who's already behind bars in Libya on separate bomb-making charges. The US alleges he conspired with a fellow intelligence official, Abdel Basser al-Magrahi, the only man ever convicted of the bombing. This was the hero's welcome for al-Magrahi in Libya in 2009. He was released from a Scottish prison with terminal cancer and died 3 years later, maintaining his innocence to his last breath. His son Ali told us everywhere he goes he's labelled the Lockerbie bomber's son. Here they are together after Abdel Basser al-Magrahi's release. He says he won't stop trying to clear his father's name, despite 2 failed appeals.
When you tell me, after 32 years, you blame another person, this old story is fake. My father have nothing to do with all this. When I am going to fight to the end, I'm going to prove his innocent. I'm sure 100% I'm going to prove it in UK Supreme Court.
There's so much we will never know.
Across the Atlantic, Pan Am families say the whole truth may never come to light. But Cara Weeps, who lost her brother Rick Monetti, told us extraditing the new suspect would bring a measure of justice.
Here we are, and we have this chance to really see this come to fruition in our country, have someone tried under our laws in our courts. I don't know if I can even put into words what it would mean to the families and the amount of peace it would bring them.
The Lockerbie bombing remains the worst terrorist attack on British soil. Some bereaved relatives in the UK believe Iran was to blame, not Libya, and the new charges are a smokescreen.
I don't think what's going on now over these attempts to extradite other Libyans for trial have any purpose, in my mind, other than maintaining the fiction that there is a meaningful, ongoing criminal investigation still extant.
Is the truth here in Libya? Are there more answers to come, so many years after the attack? Maybe, maybe not. What's clear is Libya wants good relations with the US, and it wants an extradition. Orla Guerin, BBC News, Tripoli.
A 4-year-old girl missing for 18 days in Western Australia has been found alive and well. Cleo Smith was found by police locked in a house. She had disappeared while on a family camping holiday near the town of Carnarvon. A 36-year-old man is being questioned by police. The 2021 Booker Prize was won this evening by the South African novelist Damon Galgut for The Promise, set near the city of his birth, Pretoria. Previously shortlisted, it was third time lucky for him as he beat off 5 other authors to pick up the £50,000 award. The ceremony was held at the BBC's Radio Theatre in London, and our arts correspondent Rebecca Jones was in the audience.
Welcome to the Booker Prize award ceremony.
No big banquet or black bow ties, but at least it wasn't on Zoom. And although it was a smaller show than usual, for the 6 shortlisted authors, the stakes were just as high as the winner was announced.
The Promise by Damon Galgut.
The South African author has been shortlisted twice before.
It's taken a long while to get here, and now that I have, I kind of feel that I shouldn't be here.
The Promise is his 9th book. It's about a white family's decades-long failure to honour a promise made to their black housekeeper. Set against the troubled backdrop of apartheid South Africa and the years that followed.
South Africa is an extremely complicated place, and like a lot of other countries where the recent past is really thorny and tumultuous, it hurts you, I guess. It's knotted up in you, and yeah, there's a sort of exorcism in writing about it.
The chair of the judges said The Promise was a tour de force.
It's a book that gets into really profound matters of life and death, of legacies, of inheritance, of generations. It's so rich with layers, and yet it is compact.
Last year's winner, Shuggie Bain, a book about working-class life in 1980s Glasgow, has now sold more than 1 million copies around the world. Its author, Douglas Stewart, who was raised on benefits, says the prize has transformed his life, but that other writers from similar backgrounds are not so lucky.
I think it's always a challenge to hear working class voices. I think actually class is one of the diversity issues that we don't talk enough about in literature, because actually it intersects with everything else, with gender, with race, and yet, you know, I feel like we're very underrepresented.
And Damon Galgut hopes his win means more African stories and voices will now be heard as well. Rebecca Jones, BBC News.
And that's it from us. Now on BBC One, it is time for the news wherever you are. Have a very good night.